It is a pleasure to be here and engaging Peter in conversation. I'm a big fan of his work. I've been a fan of his work from the first time I saw it, primarily because it immediately transported me back to my own upbringing in Nigeria. I grew up in a couple of different countries, but spent a significant part of my childhood in Nigeria. And I'm not going to age myself, but it took me back to that time. And his work is so striking. And so it's exciting to finally have the opportunity to talk with you publicly about so many themes that I think not only we share, but I'm positive can be shared with all of you in some regard, in some respect, even if you're not from Nigeria, just these themes of nostalgia and home and return and what these things mean in a world in which we are all so migratory and we probably all have many homes. And we probably, all of us, without question, have narratives that we are still unwrapping from our upbringing, that we're trying to reclaim or redefine, and that we're finally having the courage to question even. And so I think a lot of Peter's work, for me, those are touch points in which I enter his work. But I also enter his work with a deep appreciation for how he personifies Black bodies and Black stories. And to me, that's not only striking, but it's beautiful, and it calls us, I think it reminds us, not only to think about how we see ourselves, but how we see one another. And to remember that we are all storied beings, whether we recognize it or not. We all carry stories within us, stories that come from the ways in which we were raised, but also stories that come from how the world has responded to us throughout our lifetime. So, Peter, triumph of being.
Yes.
I'm going to start with, I took notes, but I rarely look at them.
Yeah.
But I'm going to start with, I'm really curious about the title.
Yes.
So let's just start there before we even jump into, sort of the details. Tell us about the title and why you chose this title.
First and foremost, thank you for being here.
Yes.
Thank you for doing this with me. I'm really, from the bottom of my heart, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Triumph of Being came about as a result of my state of mind at the time. Mm-hmm. I had a very difficult year, previous year. It was very hard on myself and my family. And I went through a phase where I was totally down, completely, like I lost track of myself, so to say. And at one point I realized no one is going to help me get out of this. I can decide to wallow in all the things that was going on around me, or I can use that as a pivot point to get myself up, to get to where I need to get to. And I choose that route. And this is the result. And at the end of it, when I look at everything, I triumph over all the difficult moments, the pain, the stress, and all the things that came with my situation at that point in time. So yes, that's why I came up with that title. And the work reflects a bit of that too, yes.
Just last night I was reading an essay or an interview of the feminist scholar who's no longer with us, Bell Hooks. And in the interview, she said something, she made a point in saying that her life changed when she recognized as a child that she was more than her pain.
Yes.
And in so many ways, I think we're prone to identify ourselves by the suffering, more so than the other things that sort of happen in our lives. But to reach a point, and we all have our sufferings. We often compare our sufferings and say, oh, mine isn't this bad, or it could be worse, but our suffering is our suffering because it is our lives, right? So to think about you being more than your pain and using the pain of your recent experience, which we talked about, which we'll talk about with one of the paintings in particular, to create this vibrant, almost fictional, but this vibrant photo album of where you come from and of people you consider your people.
Yes.
Which I also want to talk about this because all of your works so far always takes place in Nigeria.
Yeah.
But you've been in Germany for a long time.
Yes.
And but I have yet to see any paintings that come out of
That reflect that.
that
yeah,
reflect
yes.
that. And you know, you're married with a child and all of those
Yeah.
things. But based on this, so these themes of nostalgia, of return, of homegoing.
Yeah.
When I think of all your work in this exhibition, I think for me one of the consistent threads is the sense that I am being intimately viewed and looked at,
Yeah.
as much as I am intimately and looking at these characters.
Yeah.
And if I'm not being intimately looked at, I'm definitely being welcomed into that world.
Into that
I'm being
world,
drawn
yeah.
into
Yes,
it.
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I want you to talk to us about this idea of return, because I think we're always returning to multiple places.
To
right?
to multiple places, to multiple moments.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's how I see life. And in all honesty, I always look at things this way. For you to build something, you have to have a foundation. And if your foundation is not based on truth, it's going to crumble. No matter what you build, over time, somehow people are going to take it apart. If it's not people, the other circumstances will take it apart. But if whatever you build and have substance and a good foundation, it will last, or it will weather the storm. And somehow you're going to like progressively move forward. I say that to come to the point, like I can't tell other people's story without looking at, I usually look at life from my lens, because I can't tell you something about the way of the astronaut. Never studied physics to that point where I know more beyond what I see in the sky. So if I start telling you stuff about that, it will all be fictions. So I always look at, I've studied first from my father. I learned a few things, who is a self-taught artist. I learned a few things. And then I went to art school, studied. I know all that comes with the craftsmanship, and I can do that. But what do I want to do with this craftsmanship that I've acquired? And I realized the best way, I miss home, because I've been out here for so long, I miss home. And for me, I can't go and sit with a therapist somewhere and start telling them about, this. That haven't worked for me. I know it's the best way to talk to somebody about your pain. It helps relieve you of whatever you're dealing with. And my own way of doing things is to put them on the surface. I'm not a good storyteller, but this is my own way of telling my own story. So I put them on the surface. And when I have this painting hanging on the walls of my studio, it gives me the feeling like I'm home. I'm there without being physically present. So this is how my work started.
When we first come in to
Yes.
the gallery, the very first image we see, I think it's called, is that one called The Return?
The return.
That one's called The Return of the Arrival.
Yeah.
And then, to me, this is kind of the last image.
Yeah,
after
and it's actually the last piece from the studio.
Okay,
Yes.
and this one looks to me as though he's waiting to leave.
Yeah.
Okay, so we
Kind of.
have the arrival and the. When I saw the arrival, the painting downstairs, the first thing I thought of was, the main protagonist has this kind of swagger.
Yeah.
That, to me, immediately makes me think of when people come back from being abroad. Right, so we call it when you're back home in whatever country you are. I can only speak of my own in Nigeria. There's a sense of, oh, he's just come back, or she's just come back from abroad.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of like.
Yeah. I've come with all. I've acquired over time. Yes.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that image first, because as much as we're talking about pain, there's also something celebratory.
Yeah.
And even in that swagger, even when it's annoying, to those who are, who you're coming home to.
Cast, yes.
Yeah, there is something about, and as a Nigerian, we do celebrate life in all the many ways, and we are very
Whichever
kind
way
of
we celebrate
yes.
life.
So let's talk about that painting. What was it like for you creating that, and what were you?
Creating that is partially based on my own experience and how I also see other people coming back home. You long to go home, and then you arrive and you realize that you don't really belong. Yeah, because your way, and you're like, the first 2 days you don't fit in at all. Your body will, I can see all of you nodding already, because we all experience that. You really don't fit in immediately. It takes a while for you to adjust to it. And you realize that your way of thinking and your way or your mannerism has moved a bit off from how things are back home. I miss it. I miss how things used to be and how we used to carry ourselves, the things we used to do. But we've evolved, we've grown. And for me, it's kind of like there is a big gulch in between. I moved away from Benue at the age of 16. I lived in Lagos. I moved through places, a lot of places, and I ended up in Lagos. I spent 11 years of my life in Lagos. I'm from Lagos. I came to Germany, and I lived in Germany for 15. So I've literally spent the last 31 years of my life away from my place. So my memory of home is a memory of a child from maybe the age of 7, where things become very concrete, to the age of 16. So I've been on my own since. So the lens I see my own people is kind of different. That's why you will see a lot of the 70s flair, because that's people who were coming from the 70s era, who went through the big life now, growing family. These were the people I grew up around. And I see how they have to let go, adjust to being a family father or the mother of the home, and try at the same time to maintain the old lifestyle that they had. And this memory stuck with me. And from that, I just tap into 1 or 2 things. That's how I create most of this work. And for the arrival is more, when I arrive, I come with that sense like, okay, I've come now to accomplish everything. Yeah, and then I arrive, and sometimes the problem is way bigger than I anticipate. And sometimes I just go through it very fast. As fast as I come in, I would like to stay longer, but the time is never enough, and then I have to leave again. And once I'm back, I'm like, whew, that's over now. But then, it takes maybe 1 or 2 months, and I want to go back.
Yeah. I love that. I love what you say about, first, I completely can relate to going back and not fitting in, right? And people even sometimes questioning if you're from there.
Yeah.
But I love what you say about missing how you used to be. Because often, and you say that right after you said, we grow and we evolve. And so often when we think about growth and evolution, we always see it as, of course, it's always a positive thing. But I think there is something also to be said and to sit with this idea of when do we miss parts of ourselves that are no longer manifest on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And when do we miss those parts of ourselves? And are those parts of ourselves that we need to mourn or grieve? Or is it a way that we can keep returning to those parts as well, right? And maybe whether it's physically going home or finding other ways within the context you're in now to bring out that other part of you.
Yes.
I always say there are many different cities that bring out different parts of who I am. And I love Paris. I've been coming to Paris for years. At one point, I thought I would make Paris home, but Paris never felt like Paris fully welcomed me. But it was still okay, because there's still ways that parts of Enuma were brought out in Paris I really love, and so that's what I'm asking. How do you, the parts of you that you miss that you don't get when, say, you're in Cologne in Germany?
Yes.
Is there a way that you can foster those parts without going home? And I'm asking this question because I can imagine many of us in this room, this could apply to as well, that there are parts of you that you miss that are related to certain places. And so often we think it's only in the returning to that place, but how do we, it's another way of asking, how do we keep returning to parts of ourselves?
In my situation, it's more about my closest family. My mom, my dad, they're still alive. And to be separated from them for so long is kind of difficult. Now that they're getting older, I would love to spend more time with them. And that becomes way more difficult than I thought. I have my primary family now, who are my number one priority. So I live in a country where I cannot just pull my child out of school and say, hey, I'm going to Africa for 2 weeks. Yeah, you're goodbye, choose. I can't do that. Yeah, I have to put a lot of things into consideration when I make decision to travel. But my situation is kind of slightly complicated for the fact that I'm the first child. And in Africa, if you're the first child, you're responsible for everybody's high and low point. So it comes with, I won't call it burden, but it comes with such a high amount of responsibility that nobody, I mean, if I look at it from a broader perspective, I would say nobody should be shouldered with that. But I accept it. It is part of who I am. I'm not going to trade it for anything. In a way, I'm kind of proud of the fact that I can't stand for it. But sometimes it's so heavy to deal with. But I miss that. I miss the fact that I'm not there to physically fix things that need fixed. And because I can't, I'm delegating. And there is no way you tell me that if you delegate, especially when people who you're delegating things to are close relatives, they don't take things as serious as you were. They will do it at their own pace. And their pace sometimes don't fit into your way of thinking. So these are some of the things that kind of affect my state of mind most of the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, what you just did also is connect. There's a missing parts of who you are, and sometimes those parts are deeply tied to other people's lives and other people's livelihoods. And one of your paintings downstairs, I think it's called Yesterday.
Yes.
And that's of your sister.
Yes.
But it's imagining of your sister, who she would be in the future.
Yeah.
You shared with me, and I think I can share this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
That she passed away, and I love that painting because to me it was kind of, it's the idea of making a memory of the future.
Yeah.
Right. You're painting her as though had she still been alive at that certain age.
Yes,
this is what. But you're drawing also because the picture is still nostalgic. It's still drawing from the past.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that piece a bit?
My kid sister, she passed. She died in childbirth, and she lived her life on her own time. She make all her decisions, and even when you know that this is the wrong decision, all we could do is to advise her, because my family, we believe in freedom of expression. You can live your life to the fullest. We have no problem with it. But if we think you are going the wrong way, all we can do is to advise. We don't force any of our belief or our way of life on you. And she chooses her lifestyle. She has 5 kids. And she died of childbirth, including the child too, leaving behind 5. And my fond memory of her was when she was about the age of 5, back in those days, television comes on in Nigeria at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it goes off at 12 midnight. And so my kid sister will look at the time when it is like 3:30, she will go and switch it on. And one of us will say, like, switch it off, Susan, switch it off. And she will stand there and just stare at us, daring us to come for her. The moment you take a step to get up or something, she will switch it off and take off. Yeah. And I just imagine her as a grown woman turning on that television and daring us to come and tell her to switch it off. Yeah. And that was more a reflection of how I perceive her as a grown woman, because I haven't spent time with her beyond when I left at the age of 16. That was the last time we actually, we talk often, but that was the last time we are in the same space for longer than 2 days. Yeah. And I could just picture that. And now that I have to talk with the kids like every 2-3 days, every week in between now, all this stuff comes back, and it's kind of, be honest with you, it's kind of heavy to deal with. Like, I went from being the father of one child now to the father of 6 kids. And it won't stop there. You know, my other siblings also got kids also, so I cannot just be responsible for and not add the others to it. Although the others are doing okay, but I can't, if I set the standard for the kids of my late sister, I have to maintain that same standard for everyone. So yes, so that's where we are right now.
Thank you for sharing a bit about her memory.
Yeah.
You say that painting is a bit like, is therapeutic for you.
Yeah.
I don't usually ask artists to pick a favorite painting because I think it's like asking a parent to pick a favorite child. But are there any of these paintings that you feel more deeply attached to than others?
I would say that the most deep, the one I'm kind of, if there is something, I'm really never favor any of my canvas either. But if I have to pick any, I would pick my mom. Because when I was going through that, looking at doing the sketch for my kid sister as well, I went back to look at because I want to take a slight essence of my family resemblance from my mother's side into the work. And so I went into, I had a couple of photographs from my mom, and this was one of them, where she was standing with her twin sister. And I was like, it came to me and I felt like, okay, I'm put it down also as a sketch. I did it as a sketch originally. It wasn't supposed to be a painting. But before I went into that painting downstairs yesterday, I just went on with this for a while. And this is the end result. Although it has less detail, but it was, when I talked to my mom and I asked her, what was it like before you got married? Because this was just, she got married a few weeks after this picture was taken. Yeah. And she told me, and I just tried to create something around that expressed that without focusing so much on my skill as a painter. And this was the end result. Yeah.
I've been staring at this painting and trying to, I mean, it's beautiful. It's called Tenderly. And trying to pinpoint what it is that, not jarring, but what it is that she's dressed as though she's going to the city, but the scene is like a natural nature landscape.
Yes.
So that mix is really interesting to me. Do you have any thoughts behind that, or that's just what you chose to?
Because I asked her where they were, and she said they were in my father, they come from a small village, outskirts of a town called Tukpo, and she just described the area, and the visual of that spot that I had in the back of my mind was this. I can assure you everything you see in the backdrop there is just fictional. This is just my imagination. Those things don't exist. I felt how I think it should be at that point in time. How I visually pictured it to be. So that's how I came up with that. And we have this grass, and I believe it grows in your place too. It's called spear grass, super sharp. Yeah, and my people use it for roofing of round huts, houses. It grows all over the place in this field, this particular field that my mom pointed out to be the spot. And I just decided to bring a slight element, not being specific, but like give a feeling of how it will be like to have spear grass around.
Since we're talking about this, I'm going to switch just a little bit to talk about craft for a minute.
Okay.
Because you and I talked about this painting Tenderly, and we juxtaposed it with the one behind. I think that one is called Peace Invocation.
Yes.
Both centered on women.
Yeah.
Both women are pierce, their gazes are fixed on us.
Yeah.
And what I love about Peace Invocation, I said a couple of things. One, I love the mix of all the different patterns, but yet it's not busy. It's somehow you make it work. And I love her intensity, the intensity of her eyes on us. And I love her posture. I love she really, and again, this is why I'm so drawn to your work. When you do paint female figures, you paint them so strongly. And that is a new occurrence in art history, to see Black women painted so strongly and to own the entire canvas.
Yeah.
With dignity
Yeah.
and presence and sort of commanding all sorts of things. Several artists do it and everyone does it differently, but I do love how you do it. But we talked about the difference between that painting and this painting. And this painting you see as more focused on your skill.
Yeah.
And this one you see more sort of drawing, giving the protagonist the focus and sort
Yeah.
of drawing on emotion more.
Yeah.
Can you talk to the audience about the difference between the two?
I studied, once again, I'll take one step back. I studied in an art school that focused more on the craftsmanship. They give you all the tools you need to be an artist. I went to Koyaba College of Technology in Lagos, and I think some of the greatest Nigerian painters came through the school. For me, the craftsmanship makes you you could be a good painter, but that doesn't I don't believe that being a painter makes you an artist. They're two different things. In my opinion, I still stand to be proven wrong. I believe that when you can make the work, from my perspective, you can make the work more about the subject and expression, invocation, that's when you actually become an artist. Being it painting, installation, sculpture, or whatever, if you can make me walk into a room and I can go wow without looking at your craftsmanship and focus on what you're trying to say, and I'm able to get that, then you've done it for me. That's how I look at art. This is all the people I studied. That's how I also look at them. And that's what I want most for myself. This is what I aim to achieve. My biggest wish is to be able to make people come and grab what I'm trying to say, get in, be a part of that conversation. And if I can achieve that with one person or two people, then I know I've achieved my goal. That for me makes it work. But when you walk in and it is all about, oh, how beautiful, it's all that. I think every craftsman can do that. If you spend as much time as you can on it, you can do that. What I find most difficult is to be able to let go of your craftsmanship, to loosen yourself up. That gives you room to express yourself. All the people that I look up to, that's what they've done. From the way I study their work, if, for example, look at Picasso, everybody's a big fan of Picasso. If you go and look at his early work, he's a great artist. He can draw, he can do everything to T, but he chooses to express himself different. And that cut across, the subject becomes the focal point. Strip his work completely of his craftsmanship. I'm a big fan of Kerry James Marshall. And I'm very, very sure if he wants to paint photorealistic, he can do it. I've never seen him paint. And if he wants to do it, I believe he can. From what he has done in the last 40, 50 years or so, thereabout, Jesus, he can do that. No doubt about it. But he's able to strip his work and make it about the subject. And that makes the work, it gives the work a lifespan. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm not there. I'm there. I'm on the way to. And I want to get there at one point.
Another thing about your work as a whole that I appreciate is the focus on detail in a number of your paintings, and the attention you also pay to gestures and like postures, body postures, because all of those things are important parts of storytelling and
Yes.
important parts of actually how we identify one another.
Yes.
I mean, I may see someone walking on the street and just from the back and just go, oh, I'm sure, oh, that's Marianne. I can tell by her walk, you know, or there's sometimes where I'm passing a reflection and I see myself walking and I think, oh my goodness, I walk like my father, you know. So these gestures, these bodily movements that are part of our stories, part of our narrative, as well as the objects that are part of our stories and part of our narratives.
Yes.
And I'm thinking in particular of the large painting downstairs that's called Family Forum, right? There's so many, that's a very busy painting. There's so much happening in there from the, you know, the gathering of men and the two women and even the postures of the women. There's so much we can break down in that. But I'm also thinking of just the artifacts, you know, like the framed pictures, which are some of your former paintings, but the records and the kolanot on the table, you know, we know what kolanot means, and the mug that's made of enamel.
The enamel,
Right? All these things bring back so many memories, and the family album that you can just barely see underneath the coffee table. All of these things are elements of sort of the chapters of all of our stories. And because this whole exhibition to me is about your way of storytelling and also your way of bringing us into your personal narrative, but I think also inviting us to think about our own narratives and the narratives we hold on to and the narratives we're still trying to understand and make peace with. Maybe the point I'm just trying to make is this emphasis on both objects and on bodily gestures as part of our stories, to me, seems really important. And I wonder if you have anything to say about those things.
I could, you know, when you, let's roll back like 10 years ago, some of us are still in school or just graduated, started first job or something. You have a couple of friends that you hang out with often. There are moments you have a great moment and you have a bad moment. A certain moment sticks with you. The moment that sticks with you, I can assure you, if there are 10 people in that room at that point in time, the people that you were most engaged with are the people you will remember. You will remember certain details of their faces. I can assure you none of you will remember people's fingers, how it looks, except people with exceptional figures. Those are the things that stands out. The standout object in that very moment are the things you remember. We are sitting here right now. The things that stands out here are the things you will remember in days to come. We're quite a number of people here today, and you won't remember everybody, but you will remember people that you engage with. So I try the best I can on the surface of the canvas to recreate certain things that I remember. And by doing that, I also give myself the room to step back and try to resolve the entire composition by bringing other elements in that doesn't exist in the original story. Like, how would it feel? I remember there was this point in time where we were having a conversation and one of my aunts just walking and she's like, what the hell are you two talking about there? Like, kind of saying, and how would that thing fit into this narrative if I try to bring something like that in? So it becomes more like a puzzle. Like, I need to find a solution to this. I need to fix this. I need to make, okay, if she's talking to, looking at them like trying to find our place or trying to question what's going on, how, if I have a figure here, how would that figure look at the entire scene? Would the figure just look at her and look at them and like, okay, there's going to be something out of this. And so, like, I try to create more conversation out of the simplest conversation. So at the end, I believe I was able to achieve the feeling that we all have when we have this small family forum. Everybody might not agree, but we all agree to disagree and things like that. That's all I wanted. And things that usually stand out in family forums are the photo album, the big uncle who just arrived, we have to present a kola nuts to, and the drink, he's always going to get the biggest mug, or the dad of the house get the biggest mug. you remember the flower pot with the plastic
Plastic flowers,
flowers
of
and
course.
this huge things like that. These are the things that stands out for us, and I tried to remember certain part of those things and just put those elements into work. So that's how I end up with that painting. Yeah.
And I do think, I mean, you are, all these themes we've been talking about today and that are in your paintings, I think any one of us, if I called in anyone in this room to, you know, of all the themes I mentioned, you know, nostalgia, home, returning, memory, if I asked you to pick one of those things and tell a story about it, all of you would be able to do this, right? So your paintings kind of open the viewer up into not only your world, but into, I think, even invites them to be opened up to their own worlds. And coming back to the title again, Triumph of Being, in thinking of your particular situation, but I'm also thinking about the world that we are in right now, and how I think this seeking to be a triumph of both individually and collectively.
Yeah.
And to not let our pain be our sole identifying mark is a daily call. It's a daily struggle. And to find kind of I'm going to speak metaphorically, but literally for you, to find the vibrance, you know, that still exists, to find the richness of color, to me is a metaphor of looking for the colorful richness in life in the midst of all this. I do want to close with this last painting that's called, we've talked about it, but it's called Transit Point, which seems, even the name is a fitting way to end and to close it, because we never arrive anywhere, right? We always keep thinking we're going to arrive, and we never do. There's always something more, whether it's something that happens in our lives or something happening in the world, or, but thank you for bringing up these universal themes that each of us enter into in very, very personal ways. And thank you all for coming and for contributing what you did. Yes. Thank you.